Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. I'm talking with Glenn Jacobs, the mayor of Knox County, and famous WWE wrestler Kane. And we talk about the most obvious things: the band Rush, Austrian economics, Ludwig von Mises, Ron Paul, and why the Democrats are going bananas about Donald Trump and DOGE going after USAID and the Department of Education. Check it out. Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. When did you discover Rush?
Oh, before I ever got into political stuff.
Like as a kid?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, I had some cousins. See, I grew up in the country. I had some cousins down in St. Louis, and they were very much
the big
into
city.
Rush. Yeah. Then Kerry Von Erich, who was a very famous wrestler from Dallas, and that was a big company at the time back in the mid 80s. World Class Championship Wrestling. His dad owned it, Fritz Von Erich. If you haven't seen the movie Iron Claw yet, it's very good. It's very depressing.
Yeah.
But he came out to Tom Sawyer.
Nice.
Was his entrance music. So there's some crossover with wrestling as well.
So I grew up in western Pennsylvania in a place most people don't know about called Erie.
Yeah.
The most important thing about Erie is that it's halfway between Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Which means in the late 70s, early 80s, when I was in high school, all of these bands like Led Zeppelin and AC/DC and Rush and Peter Frampton and the list goes on. And I marinated in all that music. And that's how I found Rush when I was 13 or something.
But they would come through on the way to wherever place, right?
In the glory days when they really played insanely heavy progressive metal.
Yeah.
So my favorite album is Farewell to Kings.
Yep.
And I have my little shrine to Neil Peart and all of that. And that was my gateway drug because I bought 2112.
Yes.
And it's dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. And I just followed that.
Really?
Those breadcrumbs. I accidentally found a copy of Anthem. I'm like, that's that guy, Ayn Rand.
That's that guy, Ayn Rand.
I thought it was a dude. And the only reason I remembered her name is because it was different and interesting. Yeah. And that was, I never turned back. And she eventually says, read Ludwig von Mises in her nonfiction. I'm like, who's that guy?
Yep.
And this is before Ron Paul and the internet, so I couldn't get it that way. But did you notice their sort of libertarian instincts?
Oh yeah. Especially especially after I educated myself a little bit on political philosophy, and you realize, this is exactly what they're talking about. One of my favorite lines ever is scheming demons dressed in kingly guise. I was like, oh, they're talking about
our wannabe
people that hold high elected office.
Right.
Unfortunately. Yeah. It was funny when I was in college. I went through this phase. Like I would just play 2112, like just on repeat on my back then it was a tape deck. I never forget, man. One day I'm in my room and I'm studying, but I'm blaring 2112, and it ends. And I hear my roommate call out from next door. He's like, "What are we gonna listen to next?" I'm like, dun, 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 dun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I actually, to take it even a step back further, some kid during those music things in high school where you could just spend a segment bringing in albums and people would listen to them. They were playing not a Farewell to Kings, All the World's a Stage. And that's the album that I wanted, but I couldn't find it, so I had to settle for 2112. Because back in the day, the record industrial complex, they wanted you to listen.
Record industrial complex.
They wanted you to listen to Captain and Tennille.
Yeah.
And I wanted my Rush album.
Right.
So it's quite liberating today that people and everybody that doesn't know Rush should immediately go out and stream it on Spotify.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of my favorite songs of theirs is Trees.
Yeah.
And it's a socialism.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
What does it say, that the trees will all be kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw?
Yeah.
I'm like, there you have it. That's socialism, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Yeah. And he had a way. Neil had such a way of translating really complex ideas. That's the magic of it, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to pick up human action,
right? Exactly,
to get what he's talking
or
about.
you don't need to read Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah.
You know?
When did you? So you're sort of marinating in this very important philosopher king, Neil Peart, but when? What was your? I'm sure I've asked you this before, but when did you first discover the Austrians?
So let's back up a little bit. Obviously, in WWE, we're around our colleagues and our fellow performers, in many cases more than we were our families. I was on the road 250, 300 days a year sometimes. So for whatever reason, this was in the late 1990s, very early 2000s. And I'd always been interested in politics and government and those sort of things. I'd never been interested in economics because I was intimidated by numbers. Yeah. My sister's the mathematician in the family. She actually has an undergraduate degree in math. I didn't speak the math language really well. My degree's in English Lit. So I was intimidated by economics, never took an economics course in any of my formal education. But I had an interest in politics, and I was trying to figure out basically what I believed and who I wanted to align with. And I would read stuff from, quote unquote, both sides of the political right. aisle. So I would read something from conservatives, read something from liberals, and I could pull stuff out that on both sides that I agreed with, but there are things also that I didn't necessarily wasn't comfortable with. Especially this is back, during the Bush years and all the heavy emphasis on social conservatism. Mm-hmm. I knew that I hated taxes and I was a fiscal conservative. I don't call myself a social liberal because that's not the case. I'm a social conservative, but I also felt the government shouldn't be mandating all these things in our personal life. So one day I was talking with one of my coworkers, a guy named Sean Morley, and he told me I sounded like a libertarian. And I told him if he called me names again, I was going to punch him in the mouth because I'd never heard that before. But basically that...
It does sound like an insult.
It does.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, okay. And he explained the Nolan chart, where it's not just the left and right, but it's also up and down as far as freedom versus authoritarianism. So that piqued my interest, and I just kind of went down the rabbit hole. But I started with political theory and really legal theory. And was reading people like more. I actually started Rothbard with the political stuff, not the economic stuff. Same with Ron Paul. But all these people were talking about
like For a New Liberty, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. But all these folks were talking about this thing called Austrian economics, and man, I was like, no. I'm not going to go in. I'm not going to go down the calculus hole and read about in the algebra hole and all this math. But then finally, I'm like, well, this seems really important because all these people that I respect in these other areas are talking about it. So I ordered a copy of What Has Government Done to Our Money. Mm-hmm. There's one formula in the entire book, and it's basically the money multiplier and how that affects the money supply based on the reserve ratio of banks. Right? That was it. The rest was about theory and human action before I really knew there was a book called Human Action. That's when I fell in love with it, though, and I realized this is what I've been looking for.
Yeah.
And economics is not about numbers. That's econometrics, which is really a pseudoscience. But human action is actually the study of economics, and you cannot separate human liberty into two different areas of this idea of personal freedom and economic freedom. They're intertwined. and you just can't do that. And the more you kind of go down, especially the Austrian economics hole, you realize that the basis of everything is economic freedom, because it's really how do we use our time, how do we economize our time, and that's every decision we make is based on that. So that's it. And then I ended up reading everything from human action to man, economy, and state. And everything in between, and it changed my perspective, not only about economics but really about politics as well.
Yeah, like and I could spend the next 6 hours talking about this.
Sure.
And I've mentioned this to you before, but I'm working with my friend Peter Boettke, the great Austrian economist at George Mason, and I'm going to be working on a monograph actually with Logan on Austrian economics and popular culture, starting with like Ben Rogie and Leonard Reed, and maybe before or after Big Ears. I'm a big fan of your music festival in Knoxville. We could sit down and have some conversations
Sure.
about Austrian economics, because I think, not starting with Ron Paul, but Ron Paul put all those Easter eggs in his speech, just at a time when you could Google and say, who is this guy,
Right.
Ludwig von Mises? And it's just exploded since then. And right now, I would argue that the most persuasive Austrian economists are professional wrestlers and maybe
MMA fighters. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. I want to try to talk to him too.
Yeah. Well, the fact that Mr. Money wins the fight and tells the crowd to read Mises, and it's like, what world am I living in right now?
They can have Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
I'll take this.
But look at what's happening with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And he's talking about Hayek, and even though Sol's not necessarily an Austrian, and he's pretty solid with his economics, right? So it's amazing to see how these things, which were once really obscure and just scholarly, how now they've penetrated into pop culture, and you see these figures literally disseminating them to the masses. And as you said, carrying on what Ron Paul did of, hey, you really need to read. And it's not, the wonderful thing about Austrian economics is literally common sense.
Yeah.
And I really think that people are a lot smarter than they give themselves credit for. What happens is you have these experts who basically talk down to people, and you have the forbidden knowledge that only they possess. They don't want, Paul Krugman doesn't want you to understand these things, because if you do, you're going to read his article and say, whatever, dude. You have absolutely no idea what we were talking about. So it is kind of neat to see that we've circumnavigated academia to some extent. I mean, there's some good people there, but it's been through pop culture.
Two or three.
But it's been through pop culture now
that
you see more and more people talking about this issue.
This was the dream of what the internet could do. Like,
I wouldn't, just like you, I would not be. I mean, the way I found out about what his government done to our money and was able to order it was because I had the internet.
Right.
If I hadn't had that, there's no way I would have ever even gone down that rabbit hole.
It levels the playing field,
Sure does.
and perhaps that's why the bad guys are freaking out right now.
I'd say.
Because I think, Elon Musk has been red-pilled, and it's fascinating. I want to talk particularly about DOGE and the cool things happening there, but there's this fascinating group of very important, very smart, very influential people who come from the left.
Mm-hmm.
They thought they were Democrats. They thought the Democratic Party left them with their radical authoritarianism, but now they're sort of self-educating. And it's not just Elon Musk. There's all sorts of really serious people quoting Ayn Rand and Ludwig von Mises. I'm like,
it's a beautiful thing.
I'm here
isn't
for it. I'm here for it. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool. But you must feel a little anxious being here in the belly of the beast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do. We're in Washington D.C. and I always get a little nervous when I come here because it is unfortunately kind of where all this stuff emanates from.
Yeah, and you sent me a very scary article today. Maxine Waters and some 30 other Democratic legislators seem to be trying to start an insurrection outside the Department of Education. What's that about?
I mean, certainly that's what they'd be calling if it were Republicans doing it.
Right.
But yeah, they had gathered in front of the Department of Education and tried to force their way in, and an employee told them that they weren't authorized to enter. And then, of course, like, we're Congress people, we can go over where we want. But Matt, these folks, they've just gone off the rails now. They've gone off the edge. And, it's all about virtue signaling. They had their big rally the other day of no one elected Elon. Well, no one did elect Elon. But the dude that we elected said he was going to unleash Elon on all these things. So we voted for what Elon's doing. And you look and you're like, how can you be so invested in fighting against reducing government waste?
Yeah.
How can you be so invested in, they're the progressives, which means they're the ones that think, ahead. Well, maybe this thing we call the Department of Education isn't the best way to go. Shouldn't we at least talk about it instead of this knee-jerk, oh my gosh, you're trying to destroy education in our country? Well, no, the system just isn't working optimally by any stretch of the imagination. And again, or you look at USAID. Foreign aid takes the money from poor people in rich countries and gives it to rich people in poor countries. But we're all about, to the left,
right.
You're all about poor folks. You're taking their money and in many cases sending it to autocrats and oligarchs overseas. How can you justify those things? And it's almost like that they've been so just fossilized in their thinking that they can't break out of that anymore. And I actually think that's going to be the end of many of them, because I think once enough young people start looking at this and reading Mises and all these other folks, they realize those people have not a clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And this is all about political power in the end.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to offer a more cynical interpretation.
And oh my gosh, Trump's doing this. Orange man bad.
Right.
Stop.
Right. It's funny. I actually read the DOGE executive order because there was all this right. Suddenly our friends on the left are rediscovering the separation of powers,
right.
and that Congress has the power of the purse, and they are supposed to legislate,
right.
and the executive branch is supposed to stay within its things. But the DOGE department is actually something that Barack Obama created under Obamacare.
Isn't it amazing?
To focus on computer systems and data integrity. Well, that's precisely what they're doing, and I can't wait till they get to the big boys like Medicare, Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm now starting to think that there's a lot more waste, fraud, and abuse in those systems than even I imagined.
I would tend to agree. Obviously, that's just impressions that we have. But, I mean, you can just see the kind of nuggets that they've thrown out thus far. Probably for you and me, we're like, we thought that all along, but for the average person out there who doesn't pay that close of attention to these things, it's probably shocking to see that we fund transgender studies or creating transgenderism in rats.
Right.
That we're sending money to China to do experiments and torture dogs. And those are just that's not even the big stuff.
Those are the best programs.
But those are actually the small dollar programs.
Yeah.
Imagine what happens when they get to the big stuff.
Regular viewers of Kibbe on Liberty already know how obsessed I have been with the pandemic industrial complex and all of the stupid, authoritarian, and downright evil things that the government did to us during COVID-19. Well, I'm proud to announce a new investigative series that looks to get to the bottom of all of that. It's called The Cover-Up, and I'm producing it in cooperation with BlazeTV. The only place you're going to see this is BlazeTV, so go to FauciCoverup.com/Kibbe and use the code FauciLied for $30 off your annual subscription. Do it now. The truth is out there. Well, I think so. Particularly, it's interesting that they've started with USAID and the Department of Education, because I think the exposure is that none of those dollars were going to help poor people.
No.
None of those dollars in the Department of Education were going to help children or to fund teachers. It was a slush fund funding bureaucracy at best. And at worst, particularly with these USAID programs, we're Rand Paul's been talking about this a long time, but now everybody knows that USAID, and not just Fauci's NIAID,
funding,
that it's a slush fund for these intelligence and defense agencies that were not allowed to do gain-of-function research. There were compliance offices in those agencies, but there were no compliance offices at USAID or NIH because no one imagined that they would ever do bioweapons research.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't USAID actually funding military research in China?
Yes.
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 So you have Chinese, which are an adversarial power,
Right.
and we have an agency from the United States federal government that is helping to fund some of the things that we're doing.
Right.
And if that doesn't throw out some red flags, I have no idea what will.
Teaching the CCP how to do it.
Yeah.
For themselves.
Unbelievable.
No one. I can't even quite fathom.
It's unconscionable that would happen. Yes.
I can't fathom because the entire logic, and I could spend the rest of the show picking apart the logic, but the logic of this radical expansion of Fauci's power, it's actually Dick Cheney's project.
Yes. No, yes,
it's a
absolutely was.
It's a neoconservative, fatally conceited idea that we're gonna map out any potential bioweapon that our worst enemies might create, and in the process, we're gonna work with our worst enemies
to create those bioweapons.
Yeah.
It literally is what has been done.
Yeah.
I see you have a copy of Deception over there by Rand Paul.
Yep.
And he talks about how talk about no common sense. You're literally creating vaccines for diseases that don't exist in nature. So you're creating the diseases that you're creating a vaccine to prevent, but then it looks like the preponderance of evidence looks like what happened with COVID is you created this disease, and there's many reasons I say that. For instance, the cleavage, the furon cleavage site does not exist in any coronaviruses in nature. When the COVID, the SARS-CoV-2, when it was first discovered, it took SARS, I forget how many generations of mutation before it was a danger to humans.
Right.
The virus that causes COVID was immediately there. That does not happen in nature. We can't find a predecessor to that. So, and then also just all the circumstantial evidence about destroyed records and all those sort of things. But you are literally created this thing so you can create a vaccine against this thing, but then the thing, and I don't think it was done deliberately, I think it was an accident, but then the thing got out of the lab and millions of people died.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist in nature, and it should have never been introduced into our world.
Yeah. I can't believe that they did it on purpose.
Yeah. Even the Chinese, I don't think that they did, but the problem is it was just very ill-advised what they were doing.
Yeah. And you mentioned Rand Paul, who is no longer the ranking minority member of the Homeland Security Committee, and that's going to be fascinating. He has already issued his first subpoenas, and he is loaded for bear. And I did an episode of the show I'm doing, The Cover Up, with him. I think it was 6 or 8 months ago now that we actually taped it, and so much of the conversation is frustration that the Justice Department won't cooperate, and the Democrats won't cooperate, and the agencies, the health agencies won't cooperate. But if you actually wanted to get answers from the DOD or the FBI or the CIA, he's like, can't do it.
Yeah.
They don't care. It's as if we work for them. But now he's the chairman, and I think it's going to get quite interesting. He's a chairman with a Justice Department that I would expect would cooperate, and an FBI that will cooperate, and our good friend Jay Bhattacharya will be heading up the NIH.
Yeah, how great is that?
Things are going to get spicy.
They sure are. Well, when you think about transparency, let's turn to my friend Congressman Tim Burchett, who's also my predecessor as Knox County Mayor. Tim's been talking a lot about UFOs, and people think, oh, Burchett and his little green men and flying saucers. But he'll tell you that's not what it's about. It's about transparency. And he couldn't get answers from the DOD.
Yeah.
He funds the DOD.
Yeah.
Right? They have to pass their funding, and the DOD refused to answer questions about this subject. And Tim's point is, if they're hiding this from us, what else are they hiding from us?
Right.
And it doesn't have anything to do with little green men and flying saucers. It has to do with transparency and the fact that they are supposed to work for us. And as you said, apparently they think that everybody's working for them.
It goes back to Maxine Waters and her clownish colleagues. You didn't say that, I did. They don't quite like they're pretending that they have discovered the separation of powers, and they're now suddenly worried about executive overreach. But there is, of course, a education committee. That's not exactly what it's called, but there's a House Education Committee, and they do have legislative oversight. But it's not storming the doors of the Department of Education. It's actually setting up a hearing, and asking, has Linda McMahon been confirmed?
I don't know, actually. I don't believe so, but I'm not sure.
Do you know,
We'd have
Logan?
to check that.
Check it out. But by the way, how many other heads of government agencies have you ever chokeslammed before?
None.
None.
Few that I would probably like to, but none. Actually,
wasn't there a video of you chokeslamming her?
A Tombstone pile driver.
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay.
We were just discussing school choice, and she was no, that's not true. Linda's great. She is incredibly competent.
Yeah.
And she's going to do a wonderful job. And one of the things that she did get confirmed because I sent her, or I can't remember when she was nominated. I sent her a text, and we're talking about how we just got school choice passed in Tennessee, universal school choice, and she said that she would be pushing that around the country.
Yeah.
So that was good to hear, and she's another person who is definitely, definitely aligned with President Trump's thoughts on things like education. It's been very refreshing to see his take on education. And Terry, all these folks that, sorry, I just called you your wife's name. Sorry, Matt. All these folks that
everybody does that, by the way.
So sorry.
It's because they like her more
I guess.
than me. Yeah.
But and the left does this with so many things. Well, you get rid of the Department of Education, what's going to happen? Well, the states are going to take it over like they did before 1980.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with so many of these things. Obviously, as where I am politically, as kind of a libertarian, a lot of these things I don't like seeing government do anyway at all. But if government's going to do it, I'd rather the states do it because that's what conforms to the Constitution and federalism as opposed to the federal government.
Yeah.
So this going off the rails over things, the reason is because they no longer control it.
Right.
That's why.
Yeah.
It's not because your kids aren't going to be able to go to a public school. In fact, probably able to go to a better public school because you won't be wasting all this money on bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. But the real reason is because then Maxine Waters doesn't get to control the whole thing like she does now.
Yeah, it's interesting to this accusation that or this myth that if we eliminate the Department of Education, education goes away. Well, it's silly because I think that the evidence is quite obvious that the Department of Education, since Jimmy Carter created it, has degraded the quality of local education by creating a lot of bureaucratic bloat, by creating a lot of diversions, by creating an obsession with testing instead of teaching, and at this point,
and the social engineering
that
have come out through there as well.
So will Tennessee be okay without the Department of Education?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out, but I think we'll be just fine. In fact, we would welcome that, and not sending all this money to Washington, being able to keep it ourselves.
How is Tennessee in terms of choice and quality of education?
So we just passed school choice, universal school choice this year. It's a smaller program. There's 2,000 scholarships available, but it's a start. And what I always tell people is I don't think this is going to have an impact on a huge amount of people, but it'll have a huge impact on the people that need it.
Yeah.
The kids that aren't going to thrive within your conventional school. My brother was kind of like that. He went to a VOTEC school. He didn't go to a conventional school all the time. For those kids, it's vitally important. We've moved up the educational rankings over the years. Frankly, it was just by spending a lot more money. But we have a pretty robust post-secondary system as well. One of the things that I was really happy about was the governor has really been pushing CTE, career and technical education, which is something that I also think is vitally important. I think the biggest issue with our education system is that it's all about the square pegs and round holes. Well, not every kid's going to fit into that. And not every kid is going to thrive going to four-year university. Some kids are more technically inclined. Some kids want to go into the military. All of those things, and we should allow our children to experience those different career paths and those different vocations instead of saying, if you don't make really good grades in school, we should all strive for that. But if you don't make really good grades in school and go to this university and go $50,000, $100,000 in debt and graduate with a degree that you don't know you're going to do with, you're a failure. No, success depends on the individual. And I think that we can all be successful given the right tools.
The push in Tennessee and these other states, and there's a wildfire going on across the country where rhino Republicans who were sort of in bed with the teachers unions were replaced with people that actually want to fix the education system. But I think that started as one of the upsides of lockdowns, one of the upsides of parents all the damage we did. Yeah.
Parents saw what was happening in their schools.
Yeah. And part of it is it's not just the crazy curriculum stuff. It's not just the crazy transgender stuff. They saw that the process itself was one size fits all. Mm-hmm. It's all about obedience and regimentation. There's nothing individualized about it. It doesn't treat your child any different than anyone. And it basically punishes the kind of individuality and creative thinking that you would want your children to have access to. Right.
You a Pink Floyd fan?
Oh, yeah.
Another brick in the wall. I mean, and people thought that album was anti-education. It wasn't anti-education.
Right.
It was about conformity, and exactly what we're talking about here. Basically saying that everyone's the same, and you have to go. You're a round peg in a round hole, whether you like it or not, and that's just not the case.
Yeah.
So to me, school choice actually means more than just private schools. Mm-hmm. It means a diversity of educational opportunities and career exposure opportunities within whatever education system that we have.
Which demands that it become more and more local.
Yes, absolutely.
It demands that the people making decisions actually know the children and understand and listen to parents and children about where they want to go, what they're good at.
Yeah, I've been really proud of our local school system. They've gone to an academy model, which basically means that we have 9 high schools in Knox County. Each of them have essentially, you all have to take the same core curriculum. But for your electives, depending on the academy you go to, it's about work-based learning.
Yeah.
And they've involved industry now. So, you can actually go out and work at a company, or the company comes to you, or the business comes to you. Because our economy in Knox, now granted, they may move away, but our economy in Knox County is going to be different, and the needs of our businesses are going to be different than other places are. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to marry the needs with our education system. And obviously also, right now, there's just the way the global economy is going, it's innovation in tech. So a lot of that core is also things like STEM, computer science and those sort of things. But
Vivek Ramaswamy would be proud.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, it really is trying to work. For a long time, when I first came into office, for a long time, our schools have been very insular in that we educate the kids and then they're yours.
Yeah.
Well, you're not giving them the tools that they need, to survive, to be able to thrive afterwards. So I've just been very happy with them, and that our schools have realized that they're part of a community, they're part of a larger thing, and their job is to prepare kids for the future. But the only way they can do that is by having the people that are actually going to employ them, involved in the process.
That's crazy talk.
I know, right?
Are you saying closed bureaucracies don't care more about our kids than we do?
Right?
Wow. So the DOGE thing. So we're gonna deal with Department of Education. Thomas Massie tweeted out today something that I've been preaching for 15 years, and he said it differently than I would. But he's like, the Uniparty is not ready to do the heavy lifting now that DOGE has exposed USAID corruption at the Department of Education, and they're obviously going to go through maybe everything. But conversely, this wave of I haven't seen a grassroots wave quite like this since the Tea Party days. On the nominations, the nomination of Tulsi, the nomination of Kash Patel, the nomination of RFK Jr. If they had their own devices, the Republicans would kill those nominations. But I think it's going to be very difficult for them to do that. I'm hoping that wave continues, because ultimately, like, if you ultimately want to end the Department of Education, defund it, you're going to have to kill it and bury it in the ground. And that's a legislative project.
Yeah, all of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, they just are, especially now when Congress has figured out, as you said, well, they knew it all along, but now when they are talking about separation of powers, and I think, I was a big Ron Paul guy back in 2008, and I always thought, if Ron Paul had become president, we'd actually find out how powerful Congress is and how weak the presidency is, because they just overridden everything that he did. Different story with Donald Trump, because his personality, but also, I'm generally not a big one on executive orders. What he's doing is pretty amazing, though, because a lot of what he's doing is actually just turning back other executive orders.
Yeah.
He's not really legislating in that way, which is the problem with executive orders. So this, I think when President Trump won in 2016, I think they were a little surprised when they got into office. And I once heard him at a private event say that he was new to politics and he didn't really know what he was doing because he was brand new.
Right.
This time they know what they're doing. I mean, it has been impressive. I think Susie Wiles is brilliant. And these first 2 weeks have been amazing, but it's only the first 2 weeks.
Sure.
And then, as you said, eventually, you start losing that momentum. And the problem always is, hey, I'm with you with everything else, but man, I can't be with you on that one. And everybody has their one thing. So yeah, I think that he's made a lot of progress over these first couple weeks. But as we move into the next few years, it's going to be more difficult to keep on making that kind of progress. Yeah. I mean, I'm 100% behind him. That's just unfortunately the way politics works.
The Free Life, Portrait of an Artist, is the new documentary by Free the People, the story of Cuban-born artist Carlos Luna, who fled socialism under Castro to find his free life in America. You can watch it exclusively at civil.com, CIVL.com, throughout the month of December for free at civil.com. Check it out. Yeah, the Chevron decision is probably going to help people unwind the regulatory morass in a way that's more permanent than what they did in the last term. And, guys like Mike Lee and Thomas Massie have basically said, when we get to the debt ceiling, if you'll do the REINS Act,
yep,
then we can talk. And I think that's a potent negotiating chip, and they'll probably have to do it.
Yeah, one of the most difficult things about politics, even at my level, my position, is I often have to think of bigger picture stuff. So normally you would be eviscerating Mike Lee and Thomas Massie for saying they'd vote for the debt ceiling. But if you can get that in return,
right,
sometimes you actually do have to bend to get what you want. I have to do it as well. And that's the thing too. And that's actually what separates a good politician. And I'm using
Mayor Jacobs compromises?
Not necessarily compromise, but you figure out, okay, this is the bigger picture. How do we get there?
Yeah.
Okay. And you just have to do that.
It's never a straight line to the solution.
I wish it was.
Yeah.
But the good politician, I use that in the good way. A good politician figures out strategically, what is the end goal and strategically how to get there. And all too often within our movement, it's just been like, man, if you do this, I'm going to vote you out. Well, the reason they're doing that is because there's a much bigger thing that they're trying to get to, and that's politics.
Thomas Massie is every bit as much of a Dr. No as Ron Paul was, but he is all like there is a difference, and I think part of the difference is that Ron Paul was literally alone when he was a member of Congress. Thomas Massie is not alone. And he has been moving legislation, and many of his colleagues hate his guts. It's kind of hard to hate Thomas Massie too, because he's a nice guy, but he's stubborn about things that matter, and I think there's an opportunity for the good guys, the Rand Pauls and the Thomas Massies of the world, to shift the fairly corrupt legislative culture.
Yes, I believe so.
Even within the Republican Party.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And then, speaking of that, of people that think strategically, I mean, has there been anybody better for our movement than Rand Paul? The guy's actually been effective being a senator, but still being a principled liberty lover. So he's actually one of the people that I look to as far as when I'm trying to figure stuff out, and look and see how he does things, and I'll pattern my thoughts upon what he does, realizing, gosh, if we were in this libertarian utopia, I wouldn't need to be where I'm at, but we're not, and we're operating in a different world. But how can we push things in the right direction?
He's I've yet to see anybody that eviscerated him as a child-killing monster for questioning Dr. Fauci.
Yep.
He was 100% right about every single thing, and as far as I can tell, none of the apologies have been forthcoming.
Yep, same way.
Yeah.
I pushed back as much as I could at the local level, and the people that were saying that I was killing grandma.
Right.
No one's ever said, "Hey, we were wrong. You were right." But you don't do it for that reason. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And one of the coolest things, actually, for me personally, is a while back I was talking with the district attorney general from another county, and they said that they had seen what I was saying, as well as now Congressman Andy Ogles, but he was county mayor at the time too, what we were saying about COVID, and because of that, they decided not to prosecute anyone in their jurisdiction for violating public health orders. And it was amazing to me, because I was just like, just sometimes just talking about things results in a good outcome. And people who shouldn't be in jail stayed out of jail just because we were saying the right stuff.
Right.
So in the end, I don't care if the other people apologize or not.
Right.
I have that.
But it's also like how you do it. Like you have a style quite similar to Thomas Massie. You have a smile on your face, and you have an ability to translate insanely complex issues, like epidemiology. We all had to. Let's pick up epidemiology today. But it helps that you can explain it with a good spirit, and also have the stones to just take the heat.
Yeah.
And it makes it safer for other people. Politicians are not always the most courageous people. I don't know if you know that.
That's something else that I'm really proud of. Is I'd had some other county mayors in our area say that they didn't want to do a lot of the things either, but I gave them cover because everybody's yelled at me.
Right.
So it was okay. He's the one taking the heat. We can do this.
Yeah.
But that's also I just also kind of consider that my role.
Yeah.
You just have to do that sometimes.
So which Trump nominees are you most excited about?
Tulsi is a big one. Linda as well, obviously. Kash Patel at the FBI. The FBI, sadly, it's just been the DOJ has been completely, and Bondi, the DOJ has just been completely weaponized, and that might be the worst legacy of the Biden administration. For all of our faults of our political system, the criminal justice system, and granted it has a lot of flaws as well, but it was based on this idea of justice is blind, and just Anglo-American jurisprudence, right? And we quickly moving into a banana republic because the DOJ weaponized the law and was using it for political purposes.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, if we can turn that back and return to the basis of the criminal justice system is for criminal justice,
yeah,
and not for going after people you don't agree with politically, we'd be in a much better place.
I sort of love the fact that.
And also Pete Hegseth. I got to meet him a couple months before he was nominated to Secretary of Defense. He was in Knoxville at a fundraiser for a Christian academy, and a super sharp guy. But like when I pick up my Twitter one day and there's Pete Hegseth, I was like, wait, I sat next to that dude 3 weeks ago. So that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. My more restrained foreign policy friends assure me that he is good. And we'll find out. But I also learned today that he supports Defend the Guard.
Yes.
Which is pretty hardcore.
The difference is, and this is not obviously nothing against generals, but once you get to you're a flag officer, you become pretty much a politician, right? Where a guy like Pete Hegseth, he understands. I mean, he was deployed 3 times. He's decorated combat veteran. He understands that, so he's going to stand by those people. And you look at what Trump wants. Trump wants a strong military, so we don't have to use it. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what Hegseth agrees with.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting about Tulsi, and we're talking about this again today because Tulsi and RFK, I'll single them out because they come from the left. They're career Democrats. Tulsi actually gave up her vice chairmanship of the Democratic National Committee because the party, the Hillary machine, screwed Bernie Sanders at the convention.
Right.
And no, this table. This is all Miguel's fault. Yeah, we lost the screwdriver. So is Bernie going to support her, or is he going to throw her under the bus? Is it his hysterical behavior at the RFK hearing? It's fascinating to watch them betray their own.
Well, remember, he didn't take any money from pharmaceutical companies. Matt, remember that?
I got tired reading the list. I had to stop.
I know. And, that's another thing that all of this has revealed is these people that talk the talk, they don't walk the walk.
Yeah.
So that's been pretty gratifying, actually. I don't know if he does or not. That's a big one because obviously when we talk about the deep state, we're really talking about the intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
Right. And the DOJ and the FBI and some of the things that they engage in, but that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's the holy grail, especially for the left and these career politicians. And they realize that things would be a lot different. I would hope, with her in that capacity. So that might be the hardest one because and this goes through some Republicans too, is they're going to want to preserve that
right.
Probably above all else.
Yeah. The neocons are anxious and they're. I can't tell which party they belong to anymore because Dick Cheney keeps bumping back and forth.
Yeah, and there's no doubt about that, and Liz Cheney as well.
Right.
But there's some great Republicans right now, and I think that they're really aligned with Trump. Some of them because it's Trump, and you better be, or you're going to be in trouble. But unfortunately, you do still have the usual suspects who are a little squishy on some things. And this is this is just the most important thing to them.
I don't know what the status is, but there's a rumor that's more than a rumor that they want to vote for Tulsi in secret, which would, I think, the grassroots would literally explode if they tried to do that. And I don't. Is that constitutional? Is it legal? I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it tells you that they don't want to, and they're feeling tremendous pressure to fall in line. The phone lines are melting.
Yeah.
And it's like I said earlier, it's nothing I've seen since the Tea Party. Even going back to the Wall Street bailout was the most huge spontaneous wave of grassroots opposition that at least in the short run stopped Boehner and Pelosi from cutting a deal. That's happening here, and I think the one thing I'll say about most politicians is they're scaredy cats. So
yeah, there's no doubt that public pressure
yeah
does influence.
I know you're not a scaredy cat, but,
but you also have to listen to what people are thinking.
Yeah.
At the same time. So it just is what it is.
Yeah.
But the more pressure that everyone can put on them, obviously, the better.
So how is Knox County? Are you past the demonization of being opposed to shutting down schools?
Knox County is doing very well. We're preparing our budget for this year. We won't raise taxes this year again, and we haven't raised property taxes since 1999. So we've had some good fiscal stewardship along the way. It actually becomes more difficult every year because our property tax is not indexed to inflation. So with the inflation we've seen over the past several years, it causes us to run even leaner. And if you look at, we've grown a lot as far as population. So if you look at our budget and you think in absolute dollars, it's like, wow, it's gotten bigger. But if you look at the budget and this is something I actually remember even before I got in office, I was talking to Thomas Massey. He's like, the most important metric is actually your per person spend. And our per person spend adjusted for inflation is flat over 10 years. So since I've been in office, despite all the things that we've had happen, we've been able to keep our budget where it should be, and I'm really happy about that. But this is the time of year for me. It's a little stressful because everybody wants something, but our budget is really lean this year. So the nice thing about it is I can just tell everybody we don't have the money. Whereas when they know that you have the money, then everyone comes with open hands. And if you make it known up front that you don't have the money, a lot of that is kind of mitigated.
When you were young, did you ever imagine that you would take the leap and be a politician?
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That was not on my bingo card.
Yeah. But somebody has to step up.
Yeah. For me, again, I think back to, and we started this by talking about kind of my interest in Austrian economics and how that was really an evolution of my interest in government and politics and why things work the way they do. And then the further you go down the rabbit hole, you're like, oh, things work the way they do because they're all messed up, right? Despite that, our country is still, it's still the greatest country on the planet. Despite the flaws we have, it could be a lot better. And I got into politics because, I have been an enormous beneficiary of the American dream. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. My family didn't have a whole lot of money, and no political connections, no business connections. And I found something I was good at. And in America, if you do that, there's no ceiling on how high you can go. And for someone like me who's benefited from that so much, I want to make sure that my kids, but especially my grandkids now, that is still there for them. So that's what motivates me. It's I didn't have like a particular issue or anything like that. Actually, it's all the issues. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have a particular issue as much as very concerned about the direction that our country is going. And I just want to make sure that I'm not one of those like government should take care of my grandkids. No, I want my grandkids to have opportunities so they can thrive on their own.
Yeah, yeah. Homework assignment for everybody. Go listen to A Farewell to Kings by Rush.
That's right.
And as the last couple of weeks have exposed plenty of scheming demons dressed in kingly guise.
That's exactly right.
I love it. I love it. Because once people see who they are, they will realize that they've been lied to and screwed over.
Yeah. And I'm just so thankful. I look every day on my Twitter feed and all the stuff that Elon is saying and what he's doing. And it's been amazing really to see what Donald Trump has been able to do. He won the election by cobbling together a coalition, as you said, of in some cases people that came from the left, libertarians, mainstream conservatives, all these different people. And then he is executed like no president I've ever seen. I mean, and this might be the difference between, a typical politician and someone who actually does think like a business person and who goes in with a plan.
Right.
And they've been able to accomplish that. Just the transformation of Elon Musk and the evolution of Elon Musk and how important he has been. Him buying Twitter might be the most important thing that happened in the early 21st century.
Someone
just unbelievable.
Someone else who has read the book, he's the closest we'll see to John Galt.
That's exact. But thank goodness in this case that John Galt decided to stick around instead of going off the Galt's coach.
Right. Yeah.
That's exactly what I think about him as well.
We have a T-shirt that says "Don't shrug."
Yeah.
And final thought. What was I going to say? This coalition. I talk a lot about this. The tech bros, which I think started when Trump went on the All In podcast, and just was able to hold court for hours. No notes, no political bullshit, nothing. And he brought on the tech bros. He brought on the Bitcoin bros, the Maha coalition, libertarians. So this coalition looks very different than Trump 1.0.
Yes, absolutely.
And there is so far, I'm pretty optimistic about some of the things that will happen. And I'm a grizzled, cynical libertarian who has been trying to do really crazy things like balance the budget for 30 years. So I can expect that we're not going to get as far as we want to, but again, like you said, like it's not a straight path. We gotta take the path we have.
Well, and the other thing is, what gives me a lot of hope is the Ron Paul revolution is actually still alive and well. And I talk to people within the Republican Party who are Ron Paul people. It was funny. I was at the RNC this year or last year, and I must have talked to 20 people who knew me either from the Ron Paul stuff or for Young Americans for Liberty or from this or for that. And some of them were pretty influential and held pretty influential positions. You would have never seen that, 20 years ago.
Right.
So we have a voice now, and we have a place at the table. The people, that are more the liberty wing of the Republican Party, and Trump values that. He was serious when he talked about putting a libertarian in the cabinet. So I agree with you. For various reasons, you're probably never going to get as far as you want to go, but at least it feels like the brakes have been put on, and we're no longer skidding down the hill to hell. And now it looks like we're actually going to make some headway going the right direction. And in this day and age, I think that's about all you can ask for.
We'll leave it there.
Yep, sounds good.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.